I am the publisher of something called The Daily, which is it's a sort of news product that was created specifically for the iPad. These are examples of it in a very pretty video that will play behind me. What's interesting about this is that while the product is one that kind of updates throughout the day and has breaking news and that sort of stuff, it is a contained and sort of central news product. It has an editor-in-chief. The editor-in-chief decides what's going to be in it. It has a beginning and a middle and an end, which is one of the things that our readers like a lot about it. Like it's 100 pages, and you can sort of get to the end of it and say, well, I've read this. And readers who read us a lot know that there are certain things that we have opinions on. It is a newspaper, like Steve's newspaper that you guys put out, the New York Times. It was interesting. You mentioned it had a business section, and it had it might have a local section. These are the sort of sections of a newspaper or a news product that we often expect. And again, we sort of know where our news is coming from in these. There's something called incidental exposure, which basically means that when I pick up the paper and I go and I read, whatever the piece is, the article that I want to read, there's usually other stuff in there that I didn't set out to find, right? You bump into other articles. You bump into other points of view, perhaps. And it's one reason that this has sort of been a successful model for telling stories and for transmitting news. I don't know if you can see this chart. This is from a Pew Study, and I know there's a Nielsen. Where's the Nielsen person here? Yeah, I would have got your slides. Her slides are better, she says a lot, but I believe them. But anyway, this is a Pew Study, and basically there's been a number of different studies, and they ask people where they're getting their news, and more people are getting their news not from newspapers or from other news products, but from social networks, right? I mean, this is between 18 and 24, 34% of people said they got their news from social networks, up from 12% 2 years ago. Now, if you're a user of social networks, that number actually is higher. It's more like 41%. Between the ages of 25 and 29, it's 43%. We see this in our research as well when we ask people, so where do you get your news? And a response that we hear back a lot is people say, well, you know what? If something's important, it's going to find me. Right? I don't go searching it. It's Twitter, Facebook, Google+. It's going to find me. Stories are going to find me. What's interesting about that is that that implies a certain faith in that media to give you the story that's important for you. There's an algorithm. And the algorithm behind all of these sort of services and systems, there are algorithms whose job it is to get information that is sort of interesting to you. Your Facebook feed, you expect that if there's a story that's important or if there's something that you need to know, it will come and find you. So a friend of mine, Eli Parser, gave a presentation at TED on this. He let me borrow a couple of slides to show his point. He also is the founder of Move On, which is a progressive political action committee. And he had a lot of progressive and liberal friends, and he was like, I would like to know what Republicans think. Who knows what Republicans think? So he went out and he friended a bunch of Republicans on Facebook to get their different points of views, to challenge him. And this is an example that he showed of what his feed sort of looked like, where it's a liberal friend or a conservative friend, liberal friend, conservative friend. And he followed these various folks, and he had these various points of view. What he discovered over time, though, was that the posts by the Republican friends that he followed started disappearing from his feed, right? Until eventually it was all his liberal friends. And he looked into it and discovered that these had been filtered out by Facebook. Facebook's algorithm had decided, I know you friended those people. I know you said you were interested in what they have to say. But you know what? You're not. Sorry. Right? You're not. They don't follow you. You're not clicking on them. They're not clicking on you. There's other things about who you are, and that's not going to. No, this is what you're interested in. And it's interesting that there's an algorithm that is called EdgeRank, which basically determines what it is you see. I mean, the challenge with the news feed is that if you saw everything as it happened, all the time in real time, it would be too much stuff. So they want to get you that stuff that's valuable for you. And it's interesting as well because just last week, Facebook has started a program where you can actually, when you post something to your personal account, you can pay money. You can pay $7, right, for that item to be more important in other people's feeds, right? Which is kind of interesting on the one hand. Sure, why not? Right? It's a lot of information, and I posted a really cute picture of my kid, and it's so damn cute that I'm going to pay money to make sure that everyone I know sees it. Is one example of that. But on the other hand, it's sort of interesting because there's a now sort of profit motive behind the algorithm that decides what it is that you see or don't see. So, if I'm the type of person who seems willing to pay to get my posts seen, does that mean that they're going to be seen less by people if I haven't paid for it? And then, of course, if you're on the other side of that, for all you know, you're turning on your Facebook and you're kind of seeing this information. What's particularly interesting to me is that when he looked into this, he discovered that there are 57 signals that Facebook looks at to determine what it is you should be seeing. Now, there are obvious ones, right? Who are your friends? Who are your relatives? Who do you spend a lot of time clicking? There are less obvious ones, right? Like, what browser are you using? Where are you sitting? Are you at home? Are you at work? If you're at home, are you on a very expensive FiOS high-speed dial-up? Are you on a much cheaper DSL, right? What kind of computer do you have, right? And it basically uses all of these different signals to determine and make determinations as to what it is you see. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that there's a value judgment that's placed behind that somebody is saying, well, if they're on Android, then they have less money than if they're on iOS. But the decision as to what those signals are and how they're used is a decision that's being made by people somewhere, right? Well, in Palo Alto, actually not far from here, who are determining what those sort of mitigating factors are and those mitigating signals are. What he also discovered is that it ain't just Facebook, right? He sent a bunch of friends of his, said, do me a favor, go and search Google for Egypt, right? And his friend Scott did a search, and I went back. His friend Scott did a search, and it came back with, okay, back button. Crisis in Egypt and protests of 2011. This was during the Arab Spring, and Dan sent back a search, and it came back with Egypt travel, tours, vacations, pictures, World Fact Book. Very different searches, right? And you just have to sort of look at them next to each other to see how different they are. And again, what it sort of turns out is, and it was sort of a surprise to me, frankly, what it turns out is that I kind of had thought that when I did a Google search, and you did a Google search, and you did a Google, we'd see the same thing. My guess is that Steve's searches and mine probably look very different, and Jim's probably look even more different than both of ours, in a good way, in a scientific, in a linear, right? But Eli called this the filter bubble, right? That basically there's you, and there's surrounding you all of this stuff that's on the internet. Stuff that you agree with, stuff that you don't, stuff that's challenging, stuff that isn't, stuff that's in your field, stuff that's not. But then there's this filter around it, because you get it mitigated through something, through a service like Google, Flipboard, Netflix, Yahoo News. And what you're left with, right, is these opinions and thoughts that reflect you, but don't reflect anything outside of you, right? It's a bubble. And what's interesting as well is that it's not just news, right, that this happens with. It's not just that type of information. It also happens with products, with commerce. In fact, Jim and I were talking at lunch yesterday about something that might have happened to some of you on Amazon, right, where you do a search for something, and all of a sudden, you're that person, right? Like, I bought a book for a friend who's an alcoholic, and all of a sudden it was all books on, like, overcoming your addictions, and I'm like, that's not me. And Jim will maybe tell you his story, how suddenly Amazon thought he was anti-Semitic and had a whole, ton of ideas for what he should be reading. When I first got my TiVo, for example, it would recommend stuff, and it would fill up with stuff. And after a couple of weeks of seeing what I watched, it thought I was gay, right? And I don't know if you remember this. And I was, yeah, no, it's, little queer eye, little L word, and suddenly it's like, boom. But it happens in the real world, too. And there's a story that was in the Times recently that you might have read about Target. And it was actually very interesting. What happened was this young girl in high school got a packet of coupons from Target, and the coupons said, "Congratulations, you're pregnant. Here's some coupons for these products that you should have." And her father came, barging into the store and said, "Oh, she's in high school, And when the manager called back a week later to apologize, he said, "No, actually, I should apologize." He's like, "It turns out she is pregnant. She hadn't told anybody yet." But Target knew, right? And Target knew, right, because they have patterns of what people can buy. And when people buy purses that are big enough to hold diapers, for example, and with cocoa butter, right, and have those things together, within a relatively small margin of error, they can tell not just that you're pregnant, but also what trimester you're in. And so what happened was they apologized and said, you're right. This is we're not going to stop doing this, but we're going to start hiding the coupons in other coupons. So what happens is when they determine that you're pregnant, you then get something in the mail and it says, "Hi, here are some things you might be interested in. One of them is a shovel, right? It's the summer, right? One of them are car batteries, or also cocoa butter." Folic acid. And that sort of does the trick. And what they're trying to do, and I appreciate it, is sort of be less creepy. Because the funny thing is, it turns out that getting the coupons for the things that actually you need, not everybody thinks that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just that when you don't know that that's happening, right, it turns up the creepy factor. And the way that they're able to do this, and other companies are too, is that they collect data. They know, Target, for example, when you have signed up for their club, or even just come with a credit card, or on their website, your age, your location, ethnicity, job history, salary. They know if you're in debt and how much debt you have, your home, and when you bought it, and how much it cost when you bought it. They can buy data like your web history, social media, brand preferences. Are you married? Are you divorced? What magazines do you read? How long does it take you to drive to that Target? Right? How long does it take you to drive to your kid's school, your reading habits, charitable giving? All of this information is information that Target, these are examples of information, some of which they do collect, some of which they could, or is easily buyable. And they're trying to work, they basically have behind this these algorithms that connect the dots. And again, there are decisions that are being made behind that. There's a big buzzword now, big data. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one. One of the things that sort of happened, you are, Jim, one of the things that sort of happened is in a world where we've all got, not we all, but many people are tweeting and posting and commenting on posts, and they're putting things on Facebook, and they're making credit card purchases, and they're doing all of this data, which 10 years ago, 5 years ago, was too much to store in one place, frankly, and it was hard to sift it, and structured databases that existed, it still exists today, weren't sort of capable enough of housing this data. That's changed with technology. And for the first time, we're really able, and corporations and governments and scientists are able to hold all of this data in one place. And it's a huge amount of data. We were talking about Target, for example. This is Walmart, which handles over 1 million customer transactions every hour, right? Every hour of the day around the world, 1 million things happen. They record all of it, right? It all goes into databases, which are the equivalent, it's estimated, of about 167 times the size of the Library of Congress. And that's just Walmart. We were talking about Facebook, and one of the fascinating things is that Facebook is the largest place where people share photographs. It's an amazing amount of photographs, not just in Facebook, but even outside of that. In the year 2000, about 86 billion photographs were taken in the world. It's estimated. Today, in 2012, people take about 380 billion photos a year. It's a giant, giant, giant increase, right? 10% of all the photographs that have ever been taken in the history of the world have been taken in the last 12 months, right? So it's no surprise that Facebook has over 40 billion photographs in its database, photographs that are tagged, right? Tagged with location, for example, tagged with who's connected to whom and who's in them and the people. And that's a tremendous amount of data that someone's got to figure out what to do with and figure out how you see it. And again, there are human beings that are making the decisions behind that. It's not just photographs, it's not just Facebook. I didn't know the word quintillion was a thing, but apparently it's a thing. And we create 2.5 quintillion bytes of data as a society every day. You know, it was, I think, Google that determined that 90% of the data in the world, right, that exists today was created in the last 2 years. Right, 90% of all of the data, we're talking photographs, we're talking, you know, imagine what the next 2 years is like. Imagine what the next 4 years is going to be like, right? And when it comes to figuring out what you do with this, whether it's the articles that you see on Facebook or Twitter, or whether it's the coupons that are sent to you, or what your Google search comes up with, there's an algorithm. Now, this is not an equation, it's a chart. And to be quite fair, I have no idea what it means. Actually, no, it comes from something. This is for determining whether something is a quasar or not. And I know there's an astrophysicist here somewhere. Coming. Well, then he would be able to tell us what this means. But it's an example of what an algorithm is, right? It's a series of if-then statements, right? It's a series of, you know, I'm going to record this type of data, and I'm going to share this with that person if I see this. I'm going to do X with Y. And you know, behind every algorithm, there's an engineer. There's a programmer. This is the least cheesy clip art that I could find. This looks like a guy who stepped right, it looks like the engineer stepped right out of a Disney set. Isn't he sort of like, you know, he's like in Finding Nemo or something. But it has made me think a lot about who those people are who are behind that, and what they think about, and what their ethics and moral values are, and what they look like. And what they look like relative to the general population. I worked at MTV for a while, and Judy McGrath, who was running it at the time, multiculturalism was really, really, really important to her, right? And she would say all the time, we need to get a mix of races, and we need to get a mix of genders, and we need to get a mix of, you know, sexual preferences, ethnicity. We have to get as many different points of view as possible, because our audience looks like that, right? Our audience doesn't look like the bunch of white guys in Steve's picture. I keep going back to you. It was a very moving presentation. But it looks very, very broad. And so you look to Silicon Valley and you say, well, okay, so what does it look like there, right? These are the guys who are creating all this sort of stuff. You know, and this is what it looks like. 87% of founders of internet companies in the last year were white people, right? 12% Asian, 1% black. You know, the tech industry is booming, right? Jobs are up. And the workforce in the Silicon Valley's 10 largest companies, you know, has grown by 26%, and yet the number of black workers and Hispanic workers has gone down, right? Up here, the U.S. population, right? 12.8% black, 15.4% Hispanic. You look at Silicon Valley employment, 1.5% black. It's 4.7% Hispanic. You know, and my wife Amanda, who many of you have met, was talking to me earlier about studies that she's seen that deal with people seeing themselves represented on television, or rather not seeing themselves represented on television. When you don't see people of your nationality, who reflect you on TV, there's a psychic trauma. Thank you. There's a psychic trauma to that. I watch TV. Nobody looks like me. I'm different. Something's wrong. And the question is that true with algorithms as well? When you have these algorithms that are created, when you have the programs, these services that are created by people who don't look like you, right, like the population, is there a psychic trauma that isn't as clear? Now, the good news, and I'll end with some good news, is that there are a lot of people who are trying to do a lot about this. There's an organization called Change the Ratio, which brings out the lack of women in tech. It's run by Rachel Sklar. There's a group called Girls Who Code, who's trying to get girls in high school and grade school into engineering, technology. Twitter has embraced that organization in a large way. Tristan Walker is a business development guy from Foursquare. He started something called Code 2040. 2040 is the year that more people of color will, that people of color will outweigh white people in the U.S. census. He's working with, I think predominantly African Americans, people of color, to get them coding, to put them fellowships in these organizations. So there are people working on this issue, but I do think it's an issue and something that we should keep our eye on, because there are actual people behind these services that we use making actual decisions that affect how information gets to us every day. Thank you.